Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Spirit of Liberty broadcast. I'm Pastor Tommy McMurtry from Liberty Baptist Church in Rock Falls, and just want to come to you this morning, just kind of talking about the events of the past week. A lot is going on in the United States right now. It's kind of a crazy time we're living in. Of course, we've had the lockdown that we've been dealing with over the past couple months, and now we've got riots and things are just completely out of control in many cities now across the United States. These are very dark and scary times that we're living in. And I just want to kind of share my opinion this morning, all right? So this isn't a Sunday morning sermon where I'm preaching from behind the pulpit. I'm coming to you by way of internet today, and I just want to share my opinion a little bit. And of course, my opinion that I have, it's based off of certain facts in the scriptures, but at the same time, it is my opinion too of what I think is going on. And I personally think what we are seeing go on in our country right now is the intentional, controlled demolition of the United States. We've all seen buildings collapse, controlled demolitions. The way they fall, they fall in a certain way. They fall where they want them to. It's all timed. It's set up way ahead of time. And I personally think what we are seeing happen in our country right now was intentional. I believe these riots that are going on right now, these are orchestrated things. These things did not just spontaneously happen. I personally believe these things were intended to happen. I believe that is the goal. And you say, I know what you're all thinking, Pastor Tommy. You sound like one of the nut job conspiracy theorists that are out there. And I don't normally get too caught up in conspiracies. And honestly, I've not researched this. I'm going off what I've seen. Okay. I'm not going off of, I haven't been watching many conspiracy videos. I've watched news clips of things that are going on. But I'm going to tell you, there's a couple of reasons why I think that what we're seeing going on this week was intentional. And for one, I'm going to show you in the Bible, every time we see riots going on, it didn't happen spontaneously. They were always provoked. Somebody pushed their buttons. And the people who pushed their buttons, it wasn't the people it was never the people they were mad at that stirred the crowd up. Okay? It was always the Jews that did it. The Jews would always get the mob stirred up. We're going to look at several scriptures on that. And they would get the people out of control, causing all kinds of chaos so they could have their way. That's what they did all throughout the book of Acts. We're going to see it. That's how they got Jesus put on the cross. Okay, they went and they stirred up the multitudes. They got the multitudes against Jesus. And when they did that, then the government got on board and gave the multitude what they were demanding. So in the Bible, we always see the riots and things like that was a result of people getting provoked. But two, because of the simple fact that it was obvious we were heading for this. I personally believe that the government lockdown was intended to destroy our country. I believe they were trying to destroy the financial system we have here, the political system. Listen, if we're going to get this new world order in full effect, okay, if we're going to be able to unite the world in a way that the Antichrist wants us to, there's going to be some countries that are in the way, and I believe the United States is one of those in many ways. Now, obviously, we've got a lot of problems in this country, and we've been going down a very dark path, but there are some things that are still good in this country that need to go. And many of those things are things like the Bill of Rights, the freedom of speech. That's got to go if they're going to have their way. The Second Amendment, that's got to go if they're going to have their way. A lot of the freedoms that we've had in this country have made it very difficult for the elites to accomplish what they want to accomplish. And I believe they successfully saw an opportunity. We got a virus going around. This is our chance. Let's do something while people are scared, while we got a virus going around that will absolutely destroy this country. Let's shut everything down. Let's tell everybody to go into quarantine and lower their immune systems. Let's tell everyone to wear face masks that aren't going to give any help, but it's going to show a symbol of just compliance everywhere you go. Let's do these things. Let's put guidelines, not laws, into place, because we can't put these as laws because we can never get away with it. They're unconstitutional, but we can put guidelines in place. We can get businesses, people who are in bed with the government to enforce these things. We can start turning neighbor against neighbor. We can, encourage people to snitch so there'll just be more civil unrest in this country. And if we do these things, if people can't go to work, if people aren't making money, it's only a matter of time and we're going to have riots in the streets. And I remember when they started the shutdown in March, I remember thinking when I first started hearing this could go through April, I said, there's going to be riots in the streets if this goes through April. There's no way they're going to be able to get away with that. But what was crazy, I think it shocked everybody, including the elites, they had to go through April and nothing happened. And then they even extended it through May. And then finally people started protesting. But here's what the news media wasn't ready for, okay? It was the conservatives that started protesting. Okay, and conservatives don't normally protest. They're usually too busy at work, making a living, having a life. But they went and took the jobs away from the conservatives. Now they're protesting. But here's the thing. Conservatives aren't a bunch of just crazy maniacs either. Conservatives don't go rioting. Conservatives don't go looting. Conservatives don't go shooting places up. Even if they show up to a protest with a bunch of guns, they still don't shoot anything up. We saw that in Michigan. So they never got the behavior that they needed from the conservatives and they thought they would, because the news media, they hate conservatives. They hate the right wingers. They hate the Christians. And they blame us so much for every bad thing in the world. They actually believe we cause all the problems in the world. Problem is we don't. Okay. It's not the NRA pro Second Amendment people that are always doing the mass shootings. They want it to be. They think it's going to be every time they hear about a new shooting, but it never is. But they've told themselves that so much, they were convinced if we start doing these things, then these people will act the way we expect them to act. They still didn't do it. Okay, we're decent, moral people, so they went back to the old playbook. And after months of keeping everybody locked down, after months of people being, turning on each other, and just all the stress that came on that, then we have another situation where you've got police brutality, and that is what finally got it going. And folks, I do want to say that George Floyd incident was horrible. That was cold-blooded murder by that cop. There is no excuse for it. The cops that stood around and let that happen, I believe, are accomplices to murder. And I'm telling you, these people ought to go to prison. There's no doubt about it. I believe the officer that killed George Floyd, he ought to be put to death, for what he did. I believe in the death penalty for murderers, and I believe he murdered that man. And that was a horrible, horrible thing to see. But obviously the response is not right. Okay, the Bible's clear: thou shalt not kill, but it's also clear: thou shalt not steal. Okay, just because somebody murdered someone, that doesn't mean we go stealing everything. It doesn't mean we go looting and rioting. Proverbs 28:7 says, whoso keepeth the law is a wise son, but he that is a companion of riotous men shameth his father. These people participating in these riots, they are an embarrassment to our country. They are an embarrassment to their families. They are an embarrassment to what they supposedly represent. And I don't believe that many of these people are, protesters over George Floyd and what happened to him. I think these are agent provocateurs. These people are being provoked. Many of these people are coming in to take advantage of a situation. I believe many of them are being shipped in. I believe a lot of them are funded by guys like George Soros. I believe that. I'm convinced of that. This is not good, what we're seeing here, and it's not normal. But I do believe these things are being provoked. And I believe it is by people like George Soros. I believe the news media is fanning the flames. And folks, I hate to sound, I hate to sound racist or anything, but the Jews have been doing this forever. Okay, and most of these people in the news media they're Jews. They're owned by Jewish companies. And folks, this is what they do. They stir up the multitudes. They get people going crazy. Why? Because they want to destroy. They want to bring chaos so they can have power. That's what they do. And let's look at several scriptures just in the book of Acts to see how it usually went. It says in Acts 6:10, and they were not able to resist the wisdom and the spirit by which he spake. This is talking about Stephen. Stephen is preaching full of the Holy Ghost, And they can't win in an argument with him because Stephen was right. Stephen's full of the Holy Ghost, and he had wisdom. He was guilty of having too much wisdom. And it says, then they suborned men, which said, we have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and against God. So since Stephen's not saying anything that can get him in trouble, they start making up things. They send in false witnesses. Kind of like the news media, they're always good at finding some lewd fellow of the baser sort to say what they want to say. They're always good to bring in their little panel of guests that are going to say everything that they want them to say. They're always going to be able to find somebody who is going to claim to be a victim, that will advance whatever narrative they want. They're always good at finding these people. This is what they did in the Bible days. And they lie. Okay? People lie about what I preach all the time. There's people that they don't like what I stand for. They don't like what I preach. And they find people out there to just lie and talk about all the horrible things that my preaching does. There's people out there that hate the IFB and what the IFB stands for. And so they get all these people out there talking about all these stories and things that happened to them that never happened. There's no proof of these things happening. But then you got these news media people, or even now today, maybe somebody with a big social media following that has a big platform, and they give them an opportunity to say what they want them to say. And this kind of thing has been going on since the book of Acts. And it's not that we did anything. It's not that we said anything. They just didn't like what we were doing. They didn't like what we were accomplishing. So they brought in a liar. That's what they did. And so it says, and they stirred up the people and the elders and the scribes and came upon him and caught him and brought him to the council. They stirred the people up. They got them all riled up. Okay? They got them fired up. Maybe they were upset at first. Maybe it bothered them, but they weren't ready to kill the guy until the Jews stirred up the multitude. And obviously, anybody who watched George Floyd get murdered is going to be upset by that. Okay? I was very upset when I saw that. I was very upset by that. I understand black people getting upset when they see this type of thing. Okay? There's no doubt that racial profiling goes on and that they are treated differently in many cases. Okay? I can't deny that that's the truth. But at the same time, when that happens, most black people don't just start going crazy. Okay? Most people, they don't just start rioting and looting and being violent and stealing things. That's not what they do. But if you get enough of them together and you get some people in there to provoke them and to stir them up, you might be able to get them caught up in the moment and get them to participate in some things. It says in verse 13, they set up false witnesses which said, this man ceaseth not to speak blasphemous words against this holy place and the law, for we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth shall destroy this place and shall change the customs which Moses delivered us. So notice the news reporters, they had some witnesses saying some pretty extreme things. I mean, these are some pretty bad things they're saying, but they were lies. They were lies, and they used them to stir up the multitude. And sure enough, it happened. And you all know the story. They went and they took Stephen and they stoned him to death. A man full of the Holy Ghost, a man who was just noted for his good works, mainly for his spirit. I mean, even when they're killing him, the Bible says he had the face of an angel. Even while they're killing him, he's praying for them. Lord, lay not this sin to their charge. And yet they still continue to stone him. And then Bible says, he falls asleep. Literally nothing wrong was done by Stephen. But yet we see a multitude stoning a man. Why? Because some Jews stirred the people up. Acts 13 verse 49 says, and the word of the Lord was published throughout all the region. But the Jews stirred up the devout and honorable women and the chief men of the city and raised persecution against Paul and Barnabas and expelled them out of their coast. Now notice here, okay, they're successfully publishing the word of God everywhere they go. I mean, they're successfully getting the job done. They're being a witness. Now, folks, the gospel, there is not a single dangerous thing about it, physically speaking. We are telling people that they are sinners, that sin is bad. How are we going to hurt anybody by telling them that sin is a bad thing? Okay, if we teach that, we're teaching them you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't bear false witness, you shouldn't do all these things that makes the world a terrible place. But at the same time, while doing that, we're telling these people, if you have done these things, you can find forgiveness. All you got to do is put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, and he will cleanse you from that sins. How in the world could we possibly hurt anyone? How could that even be perceived as a threat in any way, shape, or form? There's nothing threatening about that. There's nothing dangerous about that message. And yet they are successfully publishing this, which can only cause good things to happen. But what does it say that they did? They stirred up the devout and honorable women in the city and the chief men of the city, and they raised persecution. So we got to get these people out. The elites all get together. We got to get rid of these people. So they went and they got the local sheriffs, and they got the local politicians, and they got the local news media and the newspapers. I know they didn't have newspapers back then, but they said, you know what? We've all got to agree. These are bad guys. We got to get rid of them. So why? So they could stir everybody up. And what happens? They end up expelling them out of their coast. Threw them out. They didn't hurt anybody. Everything that they were preaching, and I'm not even talking spiritually, physically, would do good for the country. Wouldn't it be a good thing if less people were stealing, less people were killing, all these things the Bible says they shouldn't do? And wouldn't it be a wonderful thing too if people who had done those things and maybe had an idea it's too late for me, if they were to find out that, know what, you can have a fresh start with Jesus Christ, giving them hope, giving them the strength to not do those things anymore. Those messages can only benefit a society in every way, but yet these people, because they were wicked, they decided they wanted to stop it, and so they stirred everybody up, got them thrown out. It says in Acts 14:1, and it came to pass in Iconium that they went both together into the synagogues of the Jews, and so spake that a great multitude both of Jews and also of Greeks believed. But the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and made their minds evil affected against the brethren. Again, everything's going great. Everything's fine. Everybody's happy until the news media comes in and tells them, no, actually, these are bad guys. And I've been amazed at people who've gone to churches for years. They know the pastor. They've been to his house. He's been to their house. They know his family. They've watched him raise his kids. They've listened to him preach for years. He's visited them in the hospitals. He's prayed with them. He's done one thing after another. And pastors, you know this out there. And they know you. The news media comes along and they lie about a church and a pastor and then have the members believe it. I'll never understand that, how that happens. Most pastors today are terrified of the newspaper doing a story on them or the local news media because it will change the perception of the people in their church. Most people today are so dumb, they are so brainwashed by the news media, they will believe what the news media says over what they have experienced and seen with their own eyes. That's just how brainwashed people are. And you can talk to any pastor that's had negative news stories done about them, and they always lose people in their church, even though the news media lied. And what did they do? They got their mind evil affected towards them. They stirred them up. And then we see what happens. And so that's what we have going on in this country right now. You've got, white people and black people. I mean, good night. For the most part, I know there's exceptions out there. Okay? I know there's bad people out there. We can't get rid of those people. They're always going to be around. But for the vast majority of people, they're not having a problem. You've got people of all different races and colors interacting with each other in stores every day, in workplaces and neighborhoods, and everything is fine until the news media comes and tells you, you know what, those white people, they don't like you. Those black people, they don't like you. You guys all hate each other. And then, they want to kill you. The white people want to put you back in slavery. All these things. They're telling us these things, and then people fall for it and they believe it. And then what do we have? We end up having chaos take place. We see in Acts 17, verse 4, it says, and some of them believed and consorted with Paul and Silas, and of the devout Greeks a great multitude, and of the chief women not a few. But the Jews, which believed not, moved with envy, took unto them certain lewd fellows of the baser sort, and gathered a company, and set all the city on an uproar, and assaulted the house of Jason, and sought to bring them out to the people. And when they found them not, they drew Jason and certain of the brethren unto the rulers of the city, crying, These that have turned the world upside down are come hither also. So in this story, we see the Jews getting certain lewd fellows of the baser sort, the lowlives, the scum of the town, and they gathered them in a company and got them to assault the house of Jason. Kind of like what we see in Minneapolis too, where George Soros, he sends his cronies out there to go stir things up, send some guy out there to go bust the windows to an AutoZone, to embolden the locals to go in there and start stealing so the news media can report on them looting. And what do they ultimately want this to go to? I think they want martial law is what they want. They want to be able to show, policemen and soldiers gunning down Americans, especially if they're black. They want to see that, knowing that that will just get the country going crazy. And folks, what we are seeing right now is, there is no doubt in my mind, it is an attempt to bring down our country. There's no doubt about it. The news media is behind it. They are in on it. I understand they're not the main players, but it's the people who fund them. It's the people who own these organizations. These people are literally trying to take down our country, and they tried. They've been trying and are succeeding when it comes to the government shutdown. Okay, the government shutdown was, I'm convinced, one of the most immoral, illegal, pointless, counterproductive measures that have ever been taken in this country. And they did it supposedly to save lives. Folks, it didn't work. Many of the people in New York that are still getting coronavirus are people who have been in quarantine. You don't put people in quarantine and build their immunities that way. This isn't working. We're seeing how countries who haven't gone along with the New World Order and have stayed open, they've done just fine. Their numbers are pretty comparable with the countries that locked down. Even though the news media is out there, they're all going to die. We're seeing these states that are opening back up. They're doing just fine too. This lockdown was completely pointless when it came to saving lives, and it was also unsuccessful when it came to getting the country stirred up to where they needed it to. It fell short of that. And as the country was coming out of lockdown, and as we're seeing the numbers and realizing that this was completely unnecessary and it was not helpful, they decided, we got to do something else. And, police brutality is happening all the time. I understand sometimes it doesn't get on video, but sometimes it does. Sometimes it does get on video, but then the news media is good at kind of putting a lid on it. Social media is good at censoring these things so these stories don't get out. We know that kind of thing is going on, but this one got out real easy, I think, because they wanted it to. And it is doing exactly what they want it to do. It is causing civil unrest throughout our nation, and that is what they want. We were supposed to be rioting in April. That was what they wanted, but it didn't work. Now they've got us rioting, destroying these cities. And here's just a question I have too. I wonder what has done more damage to businesses, the government shutdown or rioters and looters. Everybody's mad at all the rioters and looters going into these stores in places like Minneapolis and Atlanta. But what about the government who was rioting and looting and just destroying businesses before all this happened? It was like, the government didn't succeed enough in taking down this country and in just destroying businesses and destroying people's livelihoods. Then what do they got to do? They're going to go stir certain lewd fellows of the baser sort up again, get them in an uproar, so they'll start assaulting places. That's exactly what's happening right now. And if you think they're done, you're crazy. They're not done. They're not going to stop as long as we let them. Folks, you've got to turn off the news. You've got to get away. We've got to stop giving these people ratings. We're giving them what they want. People watching their junk all the time. And folks, these news media sources are trash. They are known bona fide liars, from CNN to Fox News. They're bad, they're evil to the core. These people are often Jews or even funded by Jews, and they're doing the same things we see in the book of Acts. I don't know why we think anything has changed. Nothing has changed. And when you see protests get violent, when you see looting, it's always certain lewd fellows of the baser sort. These are the ones they pay attention to. You know, they paid hardly any attention in the news, hardly any, to the protests that I've been to in Chicago and in Springfield, where they were peaceful, where people behaved themselves, where there were very large crowds. But that, you know who they would pay attention to? A few homos doing counter protests. They would pay more attention to a handful of homos doing a counter protest than they would the conservatives. Now, they paid attention to the one in Michigan where people were carrying guns, but then they ignored the fact that nothing happened. They ignored the fact that nobody got hurt. You know, they just act like, you know, they were crazy, and they act like they were worse. They keep comparing the Minneapolis riots, or protests, as they call them, to the protests in Michigan where people are carrying guns. It's like, I don't know why we're so offended by these people burning buildings down and stealing things. The conservatives were protesting in Michigan, they were all carrying guns, and nobody got hurt. Not one building was destroyed. Nothing was stolen. But then over in these ones, you've got all this violence going on, and they act like they still act like the conservative side is worse. These people are scum. These people are absolute liars, and some of y'all listen to them, and you fall for this stuff. You let them get y'all stirred up and worked up in these things, and you can't do that. You need to be able to see past this and realize people right now are trying to destroy this country because of the fact that it is in many ways in the way of the New World Order. I get it. Many people are participating. Many people are promoting it within our own government. But thankfully, because of the fact that we are a republic, because we have the Constitution somewhat still in effect, and we've lost a lot of that in just this year. But these things stand in the way of them accomplishing what they want to accomplish. So they've got to bring the chaos. They've got to bring the destruction so they can bring in that New World Order, so they can bring in the Antichrist and the mark of the beast and all these things. And these things are, in fact, planned. What you are seeing going on with these protests, every time you watch these protests and you see these buildings burning, understand it was intentional. Whenever you hear about more businesses closing, I just heard today on the radio about more businesses closing due to COVID-19. Baloney. No businesses closed because of COVID-19. Businesses closed because of the government shutdown, because of the government seizing the rights of the people and telling them that they cannot work, telling them that they cannot do what they should have the right to do. That's why these things are closing, not due to COVID-19. They were specifically talking about gyms. No gym closed down because of COVID-19. It was because of the government shutdown that they closed down. They need to at least be honest about that, but they're not going to do that. But the thing is, those businesses that closed down, that was intentional. It was controlled. Big corporations are doing just fine right now. Mom and pop shops are struggling. That's controlled because they're in bed with big corporations. They can get them to do what they want. They're getting corporation to enforce all their stupid mask policies and things that they can't do legally. But they're in bed with these corporations, and they're killing the mom and pop stores. Intentional. They're destroying the middle class. Intentional. All these things are controlled demolition, and these protests that are taking place, the police brutality, controlled demolition, with the laws they're trying to enforce, all it's doing is getting good people to leave the police force, because a good person's not going to enforce unconstitutional laws. And so good people are leaving the police force, and it's getting filled with scumbags like that guy who murdered George Floyd. That's what is. This is intentional. Okay, the corruption in the police force, it's intentional. This is controlled demolition of our country, and it's high time that we stand up against it. It's high time we call this what it is. Let's not act like these things are just natural occurrences, like with the pandemic and the shutdown and these riots. These things were intentional, And much of the blame is with our leaders in office, and especially the news media. Stop giving them the time of day. So that's all we have time for right now. I hope this was a help. Not trying to discourage you, just trying to warn you about what's going on, because they are not done. Whatever the next big thing is that happens, okay, they'll try to make it seem like it was an accident. We didn't see it coming. It was intentional. They are trying to destroy us, and they're being pretty successful at it. So let's stand up against this madness and just pray that God will heal our land. So with that, thank you so much for watching. We will talk to you next week.